everyone. Welcome to Judges Night. The Type Directors Club has an annual competition. This is the 64th annual Communication Design and the 23rd annual? 21st annual Typeface Design competition. We are so excited to have you here tonight. Two of the judges who are judging the competition are going to be speaking tonight, and this weekend they'll be looking through the thousands of amazing submissions that have come in and judging the competition. I'm Catherine Casalino. I am one of the chairs for the Communication Design, and Christopher Sergio is a board member for the TDC and is also my co-chair, and he's going to be introducing Gemma.
Okay, so this is Gemma O'Brien. Over the past 10 years, Australian designer and artist Gemma O'Brien has taken her passion for typography and built a flourishing career around drawing letters. Her bold type, expressive calligraphy, and detailed illustration can be seen in advertising campaigns, editorial publications, and large-scale murals in galleries and interiors around the world. A number of her projects have received the award of Typographic Excellence from our very own Type Directors Club. In 2015, she was recognized as an ADC Young Gun, and in 2016, named one of Print Magazine's new visual artists 15 under 30. She has collaborated with numerous global brands and publications, including Apple, Adobe, Westfield, Volcom Stone, Oreo, Qantas, L'Oreal, Entertainment Weekly, Playboy Magazine, and the New York Times. Beyond her commercial work, Gemma O'Brien is a regular speaker at international conferences and also hosts hand lettering workshops at design schools, agencies, and events. Of course, you can find her work on her website, GemmaO'Brien.com, and on Twitter, and I think probably everybody's seen her work on Instagram, and it's one of the best feeds on Instagram, and we are very, very lucky to have Gemma O'Brien here with us tonight. Please give her a round of applause.
Hello, everybody. How are you going? Yay! Wait, can I take this out of, or is this going to cause technical? No, I'm going to leave it there. Okay. Let's begin. Did you guys know that Abraham Lincoln has presented at this very lectern? That's pretty cool. If you're not impressed by that, Susan Sontag has also presented for the photography fans in the room. I'm very excited to be here in New York. I left lovely Sydney to come here, especially for this occasion. But it's really great to be here. I'm very excited to be judging the Type Directors Club Awards. Did anyone here enter? Yes, okay. I'm not going to, be biased. I don't know what it looks like, but it's going to be very exciting. So my work ranges from lettering, illustration, and design, and can be seen on the pages of Playboy magazine, toilet paper rolls, and in galleries and interiors around the world. So I got my Type Directors Club annual in the mail probably about 2 weeks ago, and the weekend after I got it in the mail, I went to the Blue Mountains. Now the Blue Mountains, as people from Australia will know, is about 2 hours out of Sydney. It's a beautiful mountainous town with hiking places and secondhand bookstores. And I was looking in one of the secondhand bookstores, knowing that I was coming to New York to judge the Type Directors Club competition, and I found this, Typography 4. So this is one of the Type Directors Club annual from 1982. And so I picked it up and I looked through. This was some of the work. This could be like work from now. Look at that, you guys. Look how cool that is. This one, this could also be from now. So I don't know whether the trends have cycled around and we're imitating things from 35 years ago, or whether it is timeless design. But it was very exciting to kind of come across this book, and there was a little description about the Type Directors Club and the history and the judging process, and it made me feel very honoured to be a part of the judging process in 2018, so thanks for having me. Now, one other thing I started to think about after I looked at this was, okay, 1982, well, I wasn't even born yet. What did 1982 look like? What were they doing? So I Googled, what was it like in 1982? This is the #1 picture that comes up to what was happening in 1982. Look at him go, it's very cool. Another thing that happened in 1982 was it was the first year that Time magazine named as the man of the year the computer. So it was the very first time it was a non-person. And I think it's a perfect segue into what I'm going to talk about tonight. So if you think about 1982, the computer is the man of the year. And shortly after that, everything changed forever. And this pretty much all happened in my lifetime. So I was born in 1987. After the computer became a commonplace, we had the World Wide Web and applications and companies like Google and Facebook and Instagram that pretty much changed the way that we communicate. And if you think about this period of change, it's so intense in such a rapid and short amount of time that not since Gutenberg's printing press have we undergone such a huge amount of change. So as typographers and designers and people who are interacting with this visual culture, I've been curious over my career to see how this change might affect the way we design and what becomes important. Some people are a little bit scared about technological change. Now, if anyone's watched Black Mirror, this is how you should feel. Other people, and this is the category that I fall into, love changes. And I'm really excited to see, how these new technologies might help us or hinder us, or what will they change in our day-to-day lives of design. So if you think about everyday writing or communication. Now this is almost outdated now, this little part of my talk. It was from 2 years ago, and it was when Apple introduced into the messaging the option to replace a word with an emoji. So I was writing to my mum, I was in LA, and I said, "miss you," and it gave me the option of the blowing a kiss emoji to replace "miss you." So everything is working against the written word. Everything is conspiring against the beautiful letters and typography and designs that we create. Another thing that started to happen, which is a more recent development, is this. Oh, we don't have the audio, but that's okay. You may have seen this ad, of course, for the Animoji, where the emoji will imitate not only what you say, but your facial expressions. So this is what the written word is up against. We've got like animated poos talking and video and, home and Siri and voice and everything against the written word. In addition to that, there are calligraphy robots that are going to take our jobs, guys. Not really. This is one that's writing out the Bible in black letter. This is one from Japan that teaches the fine art of shodo. And the way that this one actually works is a person will, use the brush, and the robotic arm will imitate the speed, the pressure, as you can see here, and then that this knowledge could be passed on to another generation. You can draw letters in 3D. In addition to that, fiction has become reality. So you guys might remember Spike Jonze's film Her, in which the character Theodore's job is to write these beautiful, heartfelt letters to people, which are then written out by a robotic arm and sent to your loved ones. Now, this is a company, I don't know, does anyone know Bond? Yeah. Do they still do this? Okay, so what they do is, if you would like to send a heartfelt Mother's Day card, you can go online, it will take a sample of your handwriting, and a robotic arm will meaningfully and sincerely write that letter to your mum for you to take away the hassle. So fiction is reality. But in response to all of this kind of new technology that's coming and the competition that the written word has, then we see a video like this. Now, I'm sure, have you all seen the bus stop video? Yes. I feel like out of all audiences, you're probably the most that have seen and admired this bus stop video. And I always come back to this particular video because I love, there's nothing about this that's kind of like, it's not a social media video that's showing the behind the scenes of a cool new advertising campaign. It's just a couple of guys doing their job. There's craft behind it. There's a certain element of risk and spontaneity. It's lived, not performed, and you can't look away. And there's something about this which sticks around in the design that we create today. And despite all of the new technology, there's this human element that I think is really important to bring back into the work, no matter what form that is. So I'm going to rewind a little bit now and tell you where my story began. So I grew up in Queensland in Australia, and I was also very interested in painting and drawing as a kid. Some of my earliest design work includes Bert's book of how to make fruit salad, which featured pictures of fruit and the names of the fruit next to them. There was Violet's Party. The letter spacing in Violet's is a little bit off, but still, first foray into book cover design. And this was my first piece of digital art. So this was created when my grandparents got a computer and it had, what was it called? Word? No, not Microsoft Word. Paint, of course. And as you can see, I actually used like webdings or wingdings as the hands. So I guess it was the first use of fonts in an artwork by me at a young age. So despite being really creative and wanting to paint and draw, when I finished primary school and high school, I ended up going to law school. I think I got probably pressure from my school. I felt like if you get good grades, you should do a smart career, and so off I went. But it didn't last very long, and after a year in law school, I dropped out, switched over to a graphic design, communication design degree, and the rest is history. So by the time I made the shift, it was around 2008. So pretty much everything in the degree was all based on the computer. It was all InDesign and Illustrator, not much working by hand, especially with lettering. But then I had an opportunity to set type in the letterpress studio. So up until this point, I didn't really get typography. I didn't really understand it. I found it boring. But I had a teacher who kind of let me be an apprentice, and I learned all of these rules of setting type by hand. And suddenly it was like an aha moment. It all made sense. And so that for me was like the turning point, and I pretty much became type obsessed in my second year of university. So I started this blog, which no longer exists. It was called For the Love of Type. It was pretty much what everyone did in 2008, start a blog. And it was really just a passion project. I took on the persona of Mrs. Eves as my pseudonym. As the Type Directors Club, I feel like most of you probably know about the font Mrs. Eves. Yes, yes. I think your next lovely speaker is actually going to be using the font Mr. Eves in her talk, so look out for that. So I used this pseudonym to kind of, I guess, just write my blog, and it was really a place to just capture images of lettering and typography in my environment, signs. I think I was even so obsessed that I sent a letter once to Borders, which was a bookstore in Australia, because in the typography section, they had the word topography instead of typography. So as a very nerdy design student, I sent them a formal complaint. And the next week, they had fixed it. So in addition to writing letters to bookstores, I would kind of share posts of V's shaved out of dogs from Venice Beach. And it was really just a place to kind of, channel this newfound passion. In addition to that, I really loved drawing. So I started to fill up my university sketchbooks with combinations of lettering and illustration and kind of combining them as one. But my big break in the typography world, if there is such a thing, came when I wrote all over my body in Sharpie marker. So this was for a second-year graphics project. When I look at this now, I cringe, but it was like an anti-graffiti campaign. So I covered my body in hand lettering, made this process video that went along with it, posted it on YouTube for my tutor to mark, and didn't think much of it. Now, a week later, it had, whatever number of views constituted viral at the time in 2009. And I also received an email in my inbox, and it was from somebody in Germany who I didn't know, and he said, "Look, I've been following your blog For the Love of Type, and I thought you might be interested in reading an article that's been written about you by Jürgen Siebert, who I'm not sure if he's still the marketing manager at Font Shop, but at the time he wrote the blog Font Blog. And the name of the article, this friendly German man who sent me a translation, was Amateur Designer and hat Sex mit Buchstaben, which translates to Amateur Designer has sex with letters. And that pretty much sets the tone for the rest of the piece. It was kind of like, who is this Mrs. Eves? Is she a student? Is she a designer? She's throwing away the rules of typography. All of her work is derivative of Stefan Sagmeister, and it went on. And I was like, oh my God, who is this person that's ridiculing my, second-year design student blog? Anyway, I didn't think much of it. And then a few months passed, and I got a private message on Facebook from this Jürgen Siebert. And he said, "Dear Gemma, you don't know me." And I'm like, I recognize that name. But I wrote this article about you, and since writing it, there was a big backlash in the comments section, and a lot of the design community in Germany were like, you know, maybe you should be less harsh, maybe she's doing something interesting. And he said, in light of this, we'd be interested to hear more about the Australian design and typography world. Would you like to come and speak at Typo Berlin? So at this point, I was not even 21. I hadn't worked for any commercial design clients. I basically was just doing my university projects. And I got invited to speak at this big conference in Germany. So I said yes, and over I went. And I actually, I made a video of, you know, interviewing designers in the design world in Sydney and Melbourne in Australia to kind of give, you know, a little bit more of a look of what the design world was. And one of those people who I interviewed was Elizabeth Carey Smith, who is over here, who I have not seen since I interviewed her 10 years ago. So it's very exciting. Let's give her a clap, everybody. So I basically did a talk. I shared this video, and I went back to Australia and finished my design degree. So this was really the big break that put my name, I guess, out there in the type world, having not really done anything other than make this what I now feel is a very embarrassing video of me writing all over my body in lettering. So I kind of wanted to come back and really get some experience in the design world. So I broadened my horizons beyond just lettering and typography, and I started working at Animal Logic, which was a big 3D design company. You might know the Lego Movie or Happy Feet. So I was working as a kind of junior designer, art director. And by this point, a lot of the work I was doing was very like Photoshop heavy. There wasn't much working by hand until this one project came along for a zoo called Taronga Zoo in Australia. And the campaign was called For the Wild. So because it was kind of like a charity project, had a very low budget. So they said, look, Gemma, if you want to pitch an idea for this, you can take it through and see it to the end. So I kind of started to do these watercolor treatments for the lettering, proposed it to the brand and they liked it. And so I was able to kind of take this through to see it to the end. And it was all centered around kind of encouraging people from Sydney and visitors to the zoo to make this pledge for the wild by doing a handprint. So they supplied us with all of these footprints from like elephants and all the animals that were at the zoo to make the final piece. And I just remembered that there is no audio, so I'm just going to show it to you and talk over it. Essentially, this piece was the first time that I had the opportunity, since working in this big design company, to work by hand again. So over the course of 2 weeks, you know, there was a series of watercolor illustrations that were scanned in, and I worked with an After Effects artist to basically bring this spot to life. And after doing this for 2 weeks, I was like, oh my God, what am I doing working in this really digital-focused 3D design world? Where my heart really is in something that feels a lot more human and a lot more focused on lettering and illustration. So shortly after this job actually finished, the company went bankrupt, which was terrible for all the people who'd worked there for many years. But for me, it was the thing that kind of gave me the push to go out and go freelance. So by the time this happened, I'd lost my job and I was living in this house. This was my, and still is, my room in the attic of a house in Redfern. So I thought, well, if I'm going to be freelance now, I need to set up a studio space. So it currently was in no state for working because this is where all the parties would kick on. There's a girl drinking directly out of a Bacardi bottle there. So over the course of a year, I kind of shifted my bed into the corner of the room and translated this into my office space. So over the course of the few years, I work there, I've expanded, I have another bedroom in the house now, so it's very much a work-at-home studio space. It changes depending on the project I work on, painting on the walls and moving things around, but this is where pretty much all of my projects will be created. So by the time I was full-time freelance, it was 2012, and even though it wasn't a huge amount of time since I fell in love with typography in 2008, a lot of things had actually changed in that short space of time. So typography was mainstream. People thought that celebrities were fonts. Celebrities were tweeting about fonts. The concept of a designer as a celebrity in itself was well and truly established. Seb Lester, as you probably all know, the amazing calligrapher, 1 million followers on Instagram. And there was very much, a real shift towards trends that were just taking over the world. So a lot of the initial commercial work that I was getting was coming off the back of things like the grand chalk trend of 2013, where art directors would see Dana Tanamachi's beautiful illustrated chalk pieces that would filter back over to Australia, and like 80% of the briefs that came for me were chalk lettering briefs. Of course, letterpress made a huge comeback, which, has the versatility to adapt and change to so many different designs, but definitely, if you go to a wedding and you don't get a letterpress invitation, you may as well, not go at all. Sign painting has made a huge comeback. And of course, my favorite, the inspirational quote. So, over the first 3 or 4 years, so many of the projects working with lettering became about inspirational phrases and quotes. And it was almost as though lettering was like the vessel, lettering and inspirational quotes combined with like Pinterest and Instagram was like this force to be reckoned with. And, so I went through a phase of death to inspirational quotes. But at the same time, working with lettering, I think it's part and parcel of what you're going to be doing. But in terms of moving into the future, I think it'll be interesting to see what's the next iteration of, what will lettering be used to do once we become sick of things that Oprah says. So for me to kind of escape these trends, I wanted to find something that was unique and a way to approach my work that felt like it was truly mine. And for me, it was to embrace form and process. So I remembered that, illustration and lettering, combining them as one was always something that I had in mind. So I wanted to go back to kind of that drawing base. So this is kind of an evolution of the tools that I've used over the years. And it definitely always started out, with a pencil and ink, moving into brush pens and flat brush and pointed brush, and then more recently, moving into the Apple Pencil. And if you look at the space of time in which the iPad Pro has existed and the amount of work that you see designers produce with that technology, it's crazy. And, in 5 years' time, it'll probably be, quite strange to not be using a tablet as part of your design process. But the initial thing that I was really drawn to was kind of taking lettering and typography and making it into an illustration in itself. So any opportunity I had to, make the letter forms out of something that was in the found environment, like sticks and twigs, or make them kind of stand alone without having to be supported by photography or some other element. But it was really about, making the lettering as the hero piece. So a lot of the pieces that I created were about, adding detail and texture, sometimes with existing fonts, sometimes starting with my own lettering, and building up these pieces that were kind of really driven by this laborious dots and slowly created process. So this was for Urban Outfitters. I also went back to trying to find any way I could to not work on the computer, so working with watercolours. This was to celebrate the 30 conservation heroes for Australian Geographic magazine. And I found that once I started to put it out there that I was, working with these like old school tools, that clients would then come to me to create that. So Pentel commissioned me to create these pieces for each of their different tools with mechanical pencils, felt tip markers, and so on and so forth. And while I didn't really do a huge amount that was really like this slick vector style, there was a job that came through to create this alphabet that was really inspired by, 60s and 70s logo types, the Dictionary of Dangerous Ideas. So this was a set that was created for that. And then we have the iPad. So I was very resistant at first to incorporating this kind of digital drawing process with the iPad. But Adobe came to me and said, look, we want to do this project. You can basically create whatever you want as long as it's created within the Adobe apps on the iPad. And this for me was a real eye-opener because I had always loved working in black and white, partly because coming from this typography background and being really interested in typography, it was always about contrast, about creating something that could be seen as a logo really small but then really large, and black and white just seemed to be perfect for that. But when I started working with the iPad, it really opened up the opportunity to work a lot more with color. So that was one of the main advantages that I saw. But then also just the portability of being able to work. And I travel a lot, so being able to take it with me and draw on the go was awesome. By the way, this is not a sponsored, this is just me saying that. Having said that, after doing this project with Adobe and creating these pieces purely on the iPad, I did get approached by Apple to do a similar thing. So you may have seen this was a campaign that was specifically for artists using the iPad Pro, and it was all around the world. Last time I was in New York, it was here. And it did, by this point, I think I'd probably been using it for a year, and it definitely was more of a staple in my practice as well. So from that point forward, it really was an opportunity to explore more with color, detail, and these were some of the pieces that were created on the iPad. I also found that being able to draw kind of directly with the pen in vector was really groundbreaking for me, as that was something that had always kind of hindered my process. So now to be able to create something that was really detailed and scalable was definitely an advantage. This is also in the same Who Gives a Crap toilet paper series you saw at the beginning for their Christmas edition of Naughty and Nice. I also worked, this was a campaign that I did purely with the iPad as well, to create some beer labels for, it was called Rare, and this was basically a specifically brewed beer that represented the discrepancies in the advertising industry between minority groups. So there was 40% the difference, the pay gap represented the hops, and the different ingredients all corresponded to different statistics. And so I created 75 different combinations of the word rare, and most of these letters were either taken, drawn on the iPad, or licensed from existing fonts as well. And that was some of the set. But there's one thing that I feel like the iPad and this new technology definitely doesn't equate to, and that is this world of writing or calligraphy. I never really had a formal training in calligraphy. When I studied at design school, it was very much limited to, a little bit of create your own font, but it was really just, a photo of a letter made into an alphabet set, and that was really the extent of it. And after a few years of doing this really illustrative style, I wanted to find something that was a bit freer, a little bit faster, a little bit more expressive. And after watching videos of people doing calligraphy online, I'm like, this is something that I want to incorporate into my practice. So in between the commercial jobs, at night, I would experiment with different brush pens and calligraphy nibs, definitely using the wrong way, but getting interesting results that went along with it. I also started playing with balsa wood to try and imitate some of the techniques I would use with the brush pen, but just with this small piece of a flat edge on a balsa wood. So some of this I do in my workshops as well. So after a bit of experimentation, I started to share this on my Instagram account, and it ultimately then led to commissions that were more in this illustrative but freer calligraphy style. And some of the commissions that came out of it were the new branding for Angus and Julia Stone. I don't know if you guys know Troye Sivan, but at the time this job came along, I didn't know who he was, and I looked him up, he had 5 million YouTube subscribers, so he's another person from the music industry. And more recently, this is actually still online at the moment, the New York Times 52 Places to Go in 2018 feature has some of my brush lettering as the title, and also for each of the numbers. And New Orleans was in the #1 spot. So this really, this freer style of working with calligraphy also then came to a commission. This was actually the first entry that I ever had in the Type Directors Club competition, and it was to hand paint 37 billboards for Kieran Cider. So I did some initial tests with the balsa wood, but ultimately the pure number of 37 billboards meant that it had to be a bit more standardized in the process. So the original font was Serif script, which I then scaled up and used a brush that kind of mirrored the same thickness of each of the strokes, so that I could draw it in a single stroke at the scale. So this is the one-woman sweatshop of, I think there were 36 billboards, and there was only one spare, so if I made a mistake, that was it. So this had to be done within 4 days. And then one of the billboards had to be hand-painted live on the streets of Surrey Hills in Sydney. So with so many projects that come along these days with this kind of like live component, there was, of course, a behind-the-scenes video that kind of told the story of them being painted and so on and so forth. Now, at the time, I hadn't done much large-scale work, so I didn't have my scissor lift license. So they said, look, in order to do this, you're going to have a man who's in the scissor lift with you. When you want to go up, say up, and he'll press the button, and so on and so forth. I'm like, okay, that's cool. But by the end of it, the art director and the creative director were like, this is great, but we need a photo of Gemma, like, on the scissor lift with the artwork. We can't have that man standing next to her in the scissor lift. So the guy was like, well, that's okay, I can just lie down. So you can see him. And it was like raining, it was in a pool of water. So, yes. So what happened after this project was that suddenly, I guess, the commercial world and the design world were like, oh, she can do big stuff. And it pretty much heralded in this new era of the large-scale mural. And this has pretty much defined the work that I do over the last couple of years. There's the workshop that I'm doing. Is anyone coming to the workshop by any chance? Oh, yes, one person. You're going to get extra points. Yeah, so I'm doing a workshop at the Type Directors Club next Saturday, which is all about lettering for large-scale murals. So this pretty much came about after this project. Suddenly, you know, the number of projects that were coming in that wanted this large-scale work was just, you know, it's probably about 60 to 70% of the pieces that I do today. And if you think back to the video of the bus stop guys, and what that has, that appeal, that this kind of live element is really attractive these days because, you know, you spend so much time scrolling through your phone that as soon as there's a sense of scale, as soon as you see the person that made it, it connects with you in a different way. And if you think about the history of design, like so much of graphic design is about the designer is invisible and it should just speak for itself, and this is almost the opposite of that. It's like, I made this and look, here I am making it right now. But it also lends itself to content. So if you're creating a piece, the process that goes behind it or the live painting of it happening over a number of days is the perfect thing for Instagram stories or Twitter posts and so on and so forth. So it's kind of like analog meets digital in this merging of things, which is really popular right now. I'm very curious to see, you know, how much of a fad this will become, and if someone in like 35 years is going to be judging the Type Directors Club and she's going to say, I found this annual from 2018 and, you know, maybe murals won't be a thing anymore. But there's definitely something about them that I think has universal appeal, and whether or not the actual form of painting a mural will continue, there's something about that humanity that I think will continue throughout the work that gets created in the future. So a lot of the work is, you know, for commercial clients, but then in addition to creating these pieces for different brands or spaces, I also do a lot of exhibitions as well. So some of it kind of feeds back into it, so experimentation in the exhibition space might feed back into the commercial work. This was a huge room that was painted in 5 days in Sydney earlier last year. And the iPad as well has become a tool, I guess, not so much obviously in the painting process, but in the preparation. So things like planning different colours, it's a really quick way to experiment with those in a quick space and mock it up as well. And then I pretty much take the colours, go to the paint store, line them up, and let the painting process begin. So this was for 72 and Sunny. I think they have an advertising agency here in New York. No, I know that they do, because is that a bridge that you guys recognise? Maybe there was some artistic license. I think it's the Brooklyn Bridge. But there's hidden elements from different studios. So Amsterdam, LA, New York were hidden within that mural. But the process is often the same. So I'll start by drawing in pencil, you know, refine that design, scale it up, often using a projector in a space, and then kind of painting or finishing the final piece. This time I did one of these pieces that was only supposed to exist for a very short amount of time, was for Volcom Stone. So it was basically painted over 2 or 3 days, up for 24 hours, and then painted white the next day. And this was something that I really liked, the appeal of, you know, it being transient. You have to physically be there to experience it. And this was something that I wanted to carry across into these exhibitions that I mentioned earlier. So I try and do at least one or two a year where I'll take over a gallery space and really try and push, what level of detail can you have on a large scale piece. And so for this one, I was really inspired by these really intricate illustrative letters that you'd see like in these manuscripts or, a drop cap, and how can you take that level of detail and put it into this space so it has presence and really commands the attention. Because I loved so many, if you think about Jenny Holzer and Barbara Kruger, I loved the impact that those contemporary artists had with using this large-scale type, but it was more about like the statement itself. And I was really interested about making something that had, real beauty and intricacy at that scale as well. So this was a series that I did at Laguna Beach Gallery in March last year, and all of the phrases were taken from digital interaction. So Prove You're Human was from the little robot thing to make sure that you weren't a robot. There was the series of pressing OK, 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 so that was in various iterations in the gallery. Remember Me was from like the thing you check when you want to save your credit card details. Prove You're Human again. And this kind of filled the space in the gallery, and I loved the way that even though these were like these throwaway phrases that you use every day in your digital interactions, but they had this, power, like Remember Me is like, cues to like what legacy you want to leave or how you want to be remembered. And Prove You're Human was my favorite one because it just seems so philosophical for like a robot capture message. And more recently, this was an installation at China Heights Gallery in Sydney, and you can see here the process of taking the pencil sketch, which is done by hand, scanning that in, starting to colour sections on the actual artwork, not necessarily the whole thing, mainly so it can help with assistance. So if one area is, all the ones are purple, I'll then pencil that out on the wall and get assistants to come in and help and feel it's basically paint by numbers. So depending on the number of assistants, it could take anywhere between like 3 and 10 days to paint a wall this size. And despite being very much, this is also another piece which is at the MODA in Atlanta. So if anybody's going to Atlanta before the end of February, this is part of, I'm sure you probably heard about it, it was an exhibition which was curated by Debbie Millman called Text Me, and it features a huge number of type and lettering illustrators and artists, and all of the work features text, so it's perfect for this audience. But if you go before February, you can see this installation in person before it's gone forever. But I have started to consider life beyond these transient murals, so I'm also started to do a series of prints that are based on either murals that no longer exist or that are currently up right now. And there's also a show, if anyone's going back to Australia anytime soon, you can remember that sunny beach at the beginning, there's an installation at the Jackie Winter Gallery at Lamington Drive, and this one actually features a showcase of my work from the last 5 years, and a lot of this was actually using vinyl. So it was very therapeutic to have laboured over these large murals and then to kind of really quickly apply vinyl variations of them over a course of a week. So this was the final install, which features many of them, and you can actually also get your very own wall art of some select pieces of these murals that I've created online. So they're basically limited edition vinyl artworks that are similar, maybe different in scale to the original hand-painted piece that you can install yourself. And the final project I'm going to show you was really just a silly side project that I started when I started to fly a lot. And I started to draw puke puns on sick bags. So the first one was Fully Sick when I was flying to New Zealand. And pretty much every time I would fly, I would create a new puke pun, draw it in the duration of the flight, and then leave it in the seat. So there was Queasy Lover, Bile High Club, License to Ill. This was when, as you can see how old they are now, this was when Daft Punk brought out Get Lucky, so it was Daft Punk Get Chucky. This was when I went to Japan, Land of the Rising Lunch. And so when I started doing these, I switched my name, my pseudonym, from Mrs. Eves to Mrs. Heaves, and started the hashtag Spew Bag Challenge. So the challenge to everybody out there was to create your own puke pun, draw it on the sick bag, leave it in the seat. So if you go to Instagram, there's like thousands of them from all around the world of people creating their own. But it was a very versatile medium, so we kept on going. Puke Nukem, Everything's Coming Up Millhouse, Keanu Heaves. I gave this one to my mum as a gift, 50 Shades of Spray, Chuck Norris, Alice in Chunderland, Bigger Than Ben Hur. And then at the end of about 2 years of doing these, after having left a few of them in the seats, I started to keep them and had an exhibition of, I think it was 24 framed sick bags. And I created a few extra sick bags for the show. So there was Rage Against the Cuisine, Eat, Spray, Love. And surprisingly, they all sold out. So people have framed sick bags in their houses. And so if you want to see all of the ones that I created, you can go to spewbagchallenge.tumblr.com or on Instagram from people all around the world taking on their own spew bag challenge. And that's it from me. So thanks for having me.
Hi. My name is Elizabeth Carrie Smith. I serve on the board of directors at Type Directors Club, and this year I'm the chair of our 21st Typeface Design competition. I think, there's a reason that they assigned me to the 21st, because this year we can drink while judging, which is happening this weekend. We have 4 judges in the Typeface Design competition. We have Verena Verloc, who's a Berlin-based book and type designer. Yujun Park, who's here in New York City. She runs with Casper Lem Synoptic Office, and she's also a type designer and runs part of the design program at Parsons. And we have Diana Weissman, who's a seasoned type designer, formerly of Font Bureau, and now she works still on Font Bureau projects and just for her own projects nestled in her little house in Massachusetts. And tonight we have Sahar Afshar, who's our 4th judge, who is a type designer and research from Iran. She's currently a PhD candidate at Birmingham City University in the UK. Prior to that, she got her MA in typeface design from University of Reading. Her interest in typography during her years as a student at the University of Tehran led her to the University of Reading. And since graduation, she's been working on the design of Arabic typefaces and researching the printing of global scripts, specifically Arabic and Indic scripts. And for her PhD, she is researching Punjabi printing history and works as a research assistant with a focus on the development of the non-Latin or global script leg of the typographic hub. Please join me in welcoming Sahar.
Hi, everybody. I am super happy to be here against all odds. When Elizabeth originally asked me to be a judge for the competition this year, I instantly said yes. And then she said, will you actually be able to physically be present in New York? Because I'm an Iranian, I have an Iranian passport. And I said, let's see. And then she said, okay, cool. Do you want to also do the talk presentation, which one of the judges does every year? And she's a bit of a daredevil that way, so I said, yeah.
But against all odds, here I am. It was actually a super easy passport check, so very happy for that. And I'm going to be delivering the boring portion of the evening. Gemma did the really cool images of the design people. I'm a typeface designer. Most of my days look like me moving a single dot across the screen. Move it 2 units to the right, doesn't look quite right, move it back, do it again a couple of times, and then 5 hours later I say, it was fine as it was. That is the essence of what my talk is going to be tonight. So when I actually did get the visa and I let Elizabeth know, she said, okay, excellent. What's the title of your talk going to be? And again, I said, I think that's how I answer most of Elizabeth's questions, just one long, uninterrupted, So I went back to a friend of mine, Bianca Burning. Some of you may know her, fellow typeface designer, works at Dalton Mog in London. There's a restaurant in London that Bianca and I like to go to, and we do it quite often. It's called Dishoom. If you're ever across the pond and craving some really good Indian food, I strongly suggest it. Last time we were there, Bianca was looking through the menu for drinks, and there was a section, and she pointed out and said, oh, there's a section called Sours, Flips, and Fancies. And I instantly ventured a witticism and said, that's going to be the title of my memoir. This is not my memoir in any way, shape, or form. My career is at its infancy. This is just going to be the past 3 years where I've gotten into type a bit more seriously. So this is going to be a familiar picture is anyone in the audience from Reading, actually? No? That's so rare. And oh, there's one, huh? But it's so rare. Usually in any type conference or room of type people, when you say Reading, there's like at least a few hands shooting up. But anyway, this is the picture that most people use when they talk about the University of Reading. You see it quite often at presentations and talks. It's the department sign and the main entrance into the building. This particular picture here is from Maria Ramos, who did the MA in Typeface Design the year that I was there, which was 2014 and 15. And I phrase it that way because, contrary to popular belief, I did not do the Typeface Design program there. It's what most people instantly assume when I say that I did my MA at Reading, but that wasn't the case. I did the MA by research in typography and graphic communication. But before I went to Reading, I was already super interested in typeface design, and I'd started doing it very badly on my own. So when I actually got to Reading, I went to Jerry Leonidas, who is the program supervisor for the MA Typeface Design, or MATD program, and I asked him if I could also attend the courses and classes and seminars for the MATD. He said to me, you're going to be super busy with your own coursework. Don't do this. And I said, no, I want to. And very generously and kindly, he said, okay, knock yourself out. And I did. Alongside my own coursework, I attended most of the classes and seminars for the MATD course, on top of going to weekly seminars with the MA book design students to the Museum of English Rural Life in Reading, and being the MA student representative and attending about monthly department meetings. So when I think of Reading, as great as this picture is and as nostalgic as it makes me feel, this is not what Reading was to me. Reading to me was this. I'm very grateful to Najla Badran. I'm super grateful that there's 3 of them up there now. For this very flattering picture of me. This is the night before we had to hand in our dissertations. And I was so tired and exhausted by that time. I'm sleeping on 2 chairs, one of which has wheels underneath it. So Najla captured the moment and then pushed the chair out from under me to wake me up, because that's how she shows affection. But this is what I think of when I think of Reading, a year that was super intense. I learned so much in that year, but I was very tired by the end of it. And the result of it was this. This was my MA thesis. I won't go into any sort of detail about it, but it's proved since to be helpful to some students who want to design an Arabic typeface but aren't native users of the Arabic script. So once this was over, I handed it in and it was time to find a job, and I wanted to be a typeface designer, which is easier said than done. I had a very expensive degree that said that I had an MA in research, which had set me up for doing a PhD, but I couldn't even entertain the idea of doing a PhD at that point. I was spent. And there were very few jobs for typeface designers that require a work visa as well. And as all of you know, finding a job is a job. So what I did at that point was I decided to take some time off. And I was that person. I was the person who took a year off and traveled. For the next 12 months, I spent about 2-3 months in a given country before moving on. So it was between Iran, Canada, Iceland, the US, here in New York for a while in summer when it was much, much hotter than it is now. And then shorter periods of time in places like Turkey and India. But it was really great for me. I would fund the trips by getting any freelance work that I could. So projects like this would come up. I'm very, very happy with this project, not because of, it's not groundbreaking in terms of design in any way, shape, or form, but what happened with this project was they got in touch with me from Intercom and said they wanted a header for their blog in 4 hours. So they gave me 4 hours to do this. And at first I thought, well, they're crazy, I'm not gonna do that. And then they said, so we want this for a piece that we're writing in response to the Muslim travel ban that's gone out today. And I said, okay, I'll do it. At the time that they asked me to do this, I wasn't in any place where I could join in and protest, and I did feel very strongly about this, so I thought that this could be, if even a very small contribution. So this says affection and coexistence in Arabic, and hats off to Intercom for giving a very quick, swift reply to a policy that they did not agree with, and not in 4 hours, but in 5 hours, with a lot of emails and communication, we were able to get this out there. So that was a very happy moment for me. But the thing is, after a while, and it was coming on to a year after graduating from Reading, I thought, okay, but I want to be a typeface designer. And this isn't getting me any closer to that. So I went back to a typeface that I'd started towards the end of my time at Reading, which looked something like this at the time. I hadn't shown this to anybody, I was just working on it on my own, and I thought, okay, I'm going to spend some time with this typeface. I'm going to finish it up, and I'm going to send it to some foundries and see if anyone wants to actually publish this. The only thing I had in mind was that I wanted to design a text typeface. I wanted it to have 3 or 4 weights, and I wanted it to be comfortable reading, so it would be comfortable to read in printed text. I finished it up, and once I was happy with it, I made a specimen and I sent it to 3 foundries. And I remember my partner at the time said, okay, but which of these foundries would you actually like to publish this with? And I instantly said, well, Type Together, because they're just really great. Type Together is a small indie foundry. It was started by Jose Scaglione and Veronica Brian, and they have a really extensive list of just really great fonts that you can really look through and find something that suits your needs. So 2 days later, I got an email from Veronica, and she said, we're very happy to publish your typeface. So we started talking together, and we realized that the typeface that I'd started was a good match for a typeface that they already had in their family, in their library. It was the Athelas typeface. So I started making small adjustments to the design that I had already started on my own to match it with the Athelas font. If you have a Mac, Athelas already exists on your system, and I'm biased, but I think it's great and you should use it. And then buy the Arabic counterpart. Kidding. But anyway, I had to make small changes to make it match the Latin better. So my original bold weight was much heavier. I made it lighter to match the Latin. I changed the contrast, I changed the spacing to achieve that same color as it has in the Latin. And the thing about Athelas was that it already had a Cyrillic and Greek counterpart. So Athelas, before I even came into the picture, already spoke a lot of languages. What I wanted to do was extend this even more and give it a greater coverage. So one thing that really sets Athelas Arabic apart is that it covers an extensive amount of languages that use the Arabic script, not the usual Arabic, Persian, and Pashto, but it also covers Urdu, Sindhi, Uyghur, Jawi, Kurdish, Azok, and the list goes on. So I'm very happy about that. I received a really nice email from someone who was looking for something that would support Jawi. Once Athelas Arabic was published, Veronica and Jose said, okay, do you want to work on some other projects with us now? And I instantly said, yes, of course. They were looking to extend some of the fonts that they had and have Arabic counterparts for them. So I crossed my fingers and waited for them to tell me which typefaces I would be working on. This is the first time showing the examples of these anywhere. They allowed me to show these tonight, so thank you, Jose and Veronica. The first typeface that I'm working on for them now is Ebony Arabic. The example there on the top line. The line that they have there to describe it feels grotesque, but it's a humanist sans serif. It's multifunctional. You can use it in a lot of different settings. And it's been really fun for me so far. The Arabic that you can see on the top there, it's the ultra black weight. And I haven't ever done anything that was that dark. And it was quite a challenge to figure out what to do with the really small counters in the Arabic script. But that's been going well so far, and hopefully you'll see it sometime this year, hopefully. The second typeface that I've been working on for Type Together is Portada, and I'm super excited about this. I was a big fan of Portada beforehand. Portada is a serif typeface that is designed and optimized for use on screen, so digital publishing and apps. And for the Arabic, I've been trying to give it open counters, general proportions, and make it as legible as possible so it's easy to read on screen. What I try to do when I'm working on an Arabic counterpart for a Latin typeface that already exists is not a very usual practice of matching the two in terms of proportions. What I try to do is make the feel and the style and the color, the sort of amount of black and white that each typeface has on a given page next to each other look right. So Portada is still very much in its early phases, and it's going to change a lot from this. But what I try to achieve when I design an Arabic counterpart is to have the same feeling. So when you look at them on the page, they don't feel entirely alien. But I don't think that you need to give up any of the aesthetic qualities of one script to match it to the other, because the reader will read one at a time anyway. So this is the design stuff that I've been working on. Hand in hand with that, I also do consultation. So for companies like Daltamag, Murasawa, others that will remain nameless because NDAs. I do consultation and quality assurance. So what that means is someone who is working on a typeface will send it to me. I'll take a look, answer it, and I find it actually, and point out anything that needs fixing in my opinion and send it back. And it's really fun for me to actually do because it lets me see the design process that other people go through and what impact my feedback has on the overall design. Alongside that, I also do workshops from time to time. This picture is from a workshop that I did at Dalton Mog a few months back. It's Hannah Donker's work and her picture, so really grateful to her for this picture. This was a week-long workshop, so it was great. We got to start with calligraphy. These are examples of practice of calligraphy. We used small pens, and then we used the really big, wide Copic pens that I've become a really big fan of. And we also got to, because of all the time we had, we got to get into digital design as well, and we started to do outlines and critique sessions, as well as little presentations that I would give, and to give the participants some information, some historic information and context. So that's the design stuff that I'm doing right now and have been doing since graduation. But a bigger portion of my time is taken up by my PhD research, which I started almost today a year ago. This is the tentative title of my PhD. It's already changed 4 times, to the great dismay of my supervisors. I keep changing it. But for now, it's Punjabi Printing, a historical analysis of design, production, and consumption from its inception to the present day. I'm probably going to change that because I'm reading it now and it's like, that's too much. But it's been going really well. I'm very happy with it. It's a topic that has very, very little first-hand literature that focuses on the topic of this. So for some of you may have noticed that this says Punjabi printing. Punjabi is a language. It's not a script, right? So what I'm doing for my PhD is I'm looking at the printing of Punjabi in both scripts that are used to write it. So after the partition in 1947, India was split, and parts of it, at least, sorry. And the Punjab region was split into 2 parts. The eastern part of it, which became a part of Pakistan, and sorry, did I say the eastern part? The western part of it, which became Pakistan, and the eastern part of it, which is in North India. The part that's in India uses the Gurmukhi script, which is an Indic script, and you can see it here on you can see it on my left. And in Pakistan, they use the Shahmukhi script, which is a variant of the Perso-Arabic script. It's very interesting. It's been going really great. The problem is, like I said, very limited first-hand literature that talks about this. So I spent a lot of time in archives these days. This particular picture is from the reading room in the Department of Typography at Reading. And the pictures that you can see here are original drawings of linotype bold Gurmukhi. What I'm trying to do is, by looking at examples of typefaces through different type technologies, from hot metal to phototype setting, early digital, and open type, and let's see what happens in 2 years, I try to trace the changes that the letter forms have gone through the years, from manuscripts to what we have now, and see what effects each of these technologies had on the typographic legacy of Gurmukhi and Shahmukhi. So that's the PhD. Those are the design stuff. I also have a part-time job. This is the logo for the Center for Printing History and Culture. It's a joint research center between the University of Birmingham and Birmingham City University. The members are cultural historians, they are academics, they are librarians, they are heritage experts that all look into various aspects and periods of printing history. Now for my job there, the CPHC is relatively new itself, and so far they've mostly been focused on the Latin script. For my part, what I'm trying to do is extend the coverage and bring in more research and activities that go beyond Latin to other scripts as well. So one part of what I've been doing for a while now is putting together a conference with the help of Vaibhav Singh and Daryl Lim, who are PhD candidates at Reading University. The conference we're putting together is taking place in late June this year, and you can see the title there. It's covering a variety of different scripts, their printing history, and their culture. And I'm very happy to say that we're anticipating a very strong lineup of speakers, which we're going to announce early February, and hopefully I'll see some of you guys across the pond in June. Our weather is much, much better in June, I promise you. Don't stay in New York. Another thing that I've been doing is putting together an exhibition. So this exhibition is from the collection, from some select pieces from the collection of Dr. Lucy Raizova. Lucy has an incredible, incredible archive of material she's collected throughout the years. It consists of posters, printed ephemera, publications, all from contemporary Egypt. So this is going to probably be taking place in early 2019. We have a really nice venue for it as well. And for now, the challenge is going through Lucy's collection because it's actually so huge and it keeps on growing. Every time I feel like, okay, this is it. This is the material we have to work with. She finds another box or brings something over from Cairo. So it's an ongoing project, but for anyone who is enthusiastic about the Arabic script, especially the Ruka styles, it's a must-go-to. Those are the things that take up most of my time. Whenever I have any free time left, this is one of the projects that I work on. Well, not a project. So for those of you who don't know what the alphabets are, yes, some of them are here tonight. The alphabets it's a network of women who work in the type industry. And I'm really, really grateful and proud to be a part of this group of women because I learn from them, I get inspired by them, and every time I need help with something type related, or not, because sometimes you just need to vent to someone, I go to them and they are the most supportive, amazing people. But one thing that I really love about the Alphabets is their free mentorship program. So if you follow this link, there will be more information there. The mentorship program it gives a free mentor to someone who is just starting out in their type career, a recent graduate, or just someone who wants to learn a new, different aspect of type. Say they want to work on another script. So they fill in a form, ask for a mentor who has expertise in their area of interest, and there's a group of the Alphabets, Bianca, Eleni, Isabella, and Liron, and they look through the mentor list and they match them up with the best possible fit. And it's really rewarding. I have really, really enjoyed my experiences as a mentor. I strongly urge you, if you have expertise or knowledge in any aspect of type that you feel that you can share, any passable knowledge that you have, please sign up. We have a lot of eager mentees, but not a lot of mentors to match them up with, not enough at least. So if you can, please sign up. It doesn't really take a lot of time, but it's really, really rewarding. Beyond all of that, whenever there's very limited small time left, I work on variable fonts. Now, that's a really big statement, but I'll break it down. Show of hands, who knows what variable fonts are? I hope the rest of you aren't type designers that didn't raise your hand. Okay, I'll very quickly go through what variable fonts are. In a nutshell, variable font technology gives you the possibility of having multiple font files within one single compact font file. So what that means is, let's say you have a typeface like Portada. Instead of having several files, Portada light, regular, medium, bold, black, ultra bold. You have a single font file, Portada. And what this means is that for families like this that have extensive weights, for instance, it could be different things, but then you would have only one font file. So when you're loading this on a website, it happens much, much faster. That's one of the really great features of variable fonts. Now, another is, before, when you were using a font, you would be at the mercy of whatever the designer of that font had decided to give you. Say, for instance, in terms of weight, as the example you can see here. You would have, let's say, a light, which is the dark red color in the center, and an extra bold, which is the more pink color outline in the back. But now, with variable fonts, you have every single instance in between these two as well. So, what you can see here with the blue arrows, it's showing you, you have very fine control of what weight you actually want to use. So, variable font technology is being developed between 4 different companies. Google, Apple, Adobe, and Microsoft all work together to make this technology possible. And what's great about that is that once a given axis, so the example I showed you, I was talking about the weight axis, right? You can have different axes. You can have, for instance, X height, weight, optical size, et cetera, right? Now, what happens when one of these axes are implemented is that you can expect, you have proper expectations of how the font will behave once you use the axis that's been provided. And that's really great. That means it won't fall apart across different platforms. So what happened after they announced that variable fonts, the variable font technology, after a while they made it possible for the community to propose different axes that they thought would be useful to be implemented across different platforms. So I'm going to pull up this demo. This is something I tweeted a while back. When I heard about this, I started thinking about how we could use variable fonts for the Arabic script, because usually across history what's happened is that a technology has become available for Latin, and then other scripts somehow adapted to use that technology as well. So I thought, okay, let's try and figure out a solution where we get ahead of it and we start using this properly to solve some problems and issues in the Arabic script. So in the Arabic script, when you want to extend characters, let's say for reasons like justification, aesthetic reasons, or legibility, it's different from Latin, right? Because it's a connecting script. What happens is that the connection between 2 letters gets elongated, as you can see here. And what's been happening since the beginning of printing in Arabic was that because hot metal had the particular constraints, the connections between 2 letters would become flat lines. And that has existed since the beginning of printing in Arabic up until now. You still see, in a block of justified Arabic text, you still see flat lines that are really not nice to look at across the page. The proper way for these connections to look is with a slight curve, as you can see here, the part that's being extended and contracted. So I thought, okay, that's excellent. Variable fonts can actually solve this issue. And I tweeted this. There was a good amount of support for it. So when it became possible to propose axes, I thought, okay, now I need the help of someone who knows a considerable amount more than I do about font technology. And I went to a friend of mine, Jose Soleil, who made this demo, so thank you. And we started to work together to put together a proposal for an axis that would let us do this. Now, in order for an axis proposal to actually be accepted, it would need to solve a really big issue, or at least solve an issue for multiple scripts. And my first idea, my initial idea for Arabic, would not be enough for this, right? So we took a step back and we thought about how this would apply to other scripts as well. Now, there were the obvious choices of connecting scripts like Nico and Syriac, who could also use this, but we thought, okay, what about Latin? And not just the script style of Latin that connects as well, but isolated, separate Latin characters that are the common ones that we see and use. So what we did instead was we proposed an axis, and we called it Gext. It's on GitHub. Anyone can go see it. Anyone can go see the axis proposal and contribute to the conversation. So we proposed an axis called Gext. Now, Gext stands for glyph extension. We thought of an axis that, instead of just applying to the Arabic script, would be able to connect elongate any part of a given glyph. The difference with a width axis being that a width axis extends all of a character or expands all of a character, but this axis only extends certain parts. So it would still be useful for something like Hebrew or Latin, where you need to only, let's say, stretch out a serif, for instance, or in Hebrew in biblical text, they would have parts of characters extending to better fit a block of text and for justification. Now, when we had this idea, early 2018, so it was on the 2nd or 3rd of 2018, we published our proposal. It's been getting really good feedback so far. A conversation has started, and hopefully good things will come from that. And this is the first time I'm showing this example. The previous one is the one that everyone's seen so far. We've been working on seeing if this can actually work design-wise without disturbing the current design flow that people use. And one thing that was really important for us, currently the thing that most people have seen is something like this slider here. And what this slider does is so you can see here, parts are being extended, right? They're being elongated. But all of the parts that can extend are doing this together at the same length. We've been thinking of a different way that users can interact with a typeface. So one idea that we've come up with, and it's still in its very early ages, is the fact that giving the user the opportunity to actually select a glyph and just by pulling back and forth, adjust the exact amount of elongation that they want or need. And by some magic, Jenny Balouz managed to make this work. I'm very grateful to him for making this demo. As you can see, this isn't justified. That's because it isn't implemented yet. But hopefully, we're still in the baby stages of this. It's going well so far, and hopefully good things will come from this. But it's really great that with this technology, it's actually become possible to solve an issue for the Arabic script that's been there for a very, very long time. Thank you.